Hi friends, it's Brittany at Ink and Papyrus and welcome back to my channel. I am so excited you're here with me today because we are making one of my absolute favorite embellishments, and that is watercolor doodles. And we are going to be turning blobs into these gorgeous pieces of ephemera. I have had an undeniable urge to start making some bright, bold ephemera for a spring journal. The journal, I guess, is TBD. So I wanted to make some ephemera generic enough that it will flow into just about any spring style journal I come up with. Hands down, this is my favorite embellishment to make. It is whimsical, it's wonderful, it's magical, and it always comes together whether you're a pro or, to put it nicely, like me, a complete novice in the drawing and painting category. So, in keeping with the spring theme today, we're focusing on creating flowers, mason jars, and some adorable umbrellas. Before we get started on today's project, though, I need to show you guys all of the possibilities and essentially why I have become so obsessed with this project. If you can think it up, you can watercolor blob it, doodle over it, and make that thing birds, owls, flowers, snails, sea creatures, like sea turtles, narwhals, whales, um, leaves, butterflies, rainbows. Oh gosh, I'm forgetting so many things. Mushrooms, that's actually one of my favorite things to make, mushrooms. Hopefully, I know I'm forgetting some things, but hopefully you're seeing some things that inspire you. If you're not into creating some spring ephemera right now, there's plenty of other watercolor doodles that you can create.
So one of the reasons why these watercolor doodles is an absolute favorite of mine is because you really only need a couple of supplies. I am just using some bland watercolor paper I got on Amazon. It is medium weight. It is nothing special. I am breaking out some new watercolor supplies just because some of these colors are actually, I'm getting to the end of my palette. They have served me well. Watercolors last forever. I'm not gonna lie, I guess there is some left. I just wanted an excuse to buy a new set of watercolors. Who are we kidding? And this is the perfect project to break them out. Again, I believe I either got this on AliExpress or on Amazon. That's usually where, sometimes I'll get my craft supplies at Michael's, but, oh, this feels heavy duty. Oh, this is very nice. It seems like they pop out easily. This is Jen Crafts 48 color palette. Seems like they pop out rather easily, which is really nice because this is heavy duty. I may want to use this again even when I get to the end of my watercolors. I may want to pop these out and pop some new ones in. Oh, look at that. Oh, fancy. And the other thing I did buy for myself is it came with some watercolor paper pads, which I'm going to be using these larger pieces of paper because we're going to be doing a lot of blobs and stuff on them. The other thing I did buy myself for the first time is a palette because I actually want to work on my color mixing, and I've only ever used these pinky little ones where you really don't do any mixing. So I'm going to up my game. So that's enough about craft supplies. I'm just going to get my stuff settled and we are going to be good to go.
Wow, guys, this Ready for Joy palette is so nice. It feels so heavy duty, and it has a place where you can put your watercolors, and then the two ends fold out with tons of room for mixing, and the design is just gorgeous. I would definitely recommend checking this out. I'm a fan. Okay, so enough rambling about craft supplies. First, obviously wet your watercolors, and I want you to grab a medium-sized brush and just start laying down some blobs. I do, just because of the size and the shape of the brush, this is actually great for petals, so I do start by creating some petal-like shapes. Notice I say petal-like shapes because I don't know, I guess you could loosely say they look kind of like a petal. But I want you to remember what some of those blobs or some of those watercolor ephemera pieces that I showed you earlier, you could see that some of them just started as circles, and I doodled out flower petals from there. So if you get paint down on your paper and you say this looks nothing like a flower, I assure you not to worry. Just blend some watercolor paints together. We will make it look like a flower. We're gonna doodle on a stem if you want, some leaves, some petals, and it's gonna come out looking like a flower. There's no pressure. And sometimes I do think these look best when you focus more on blending some colors together, and letting them bleed together and creating some interest that way, and worrying about making it into the shape or the thing that you want it to be later. I hope that makes sense. If you're like me and you're a watercolor beginner, this is a great pressure-free way to learn how your watercolors react to each other, how to layer or glaze, and how to do some different techniques. Try creating some flowers, maybe doing a wet on wet technique where you put some clean water down first and then put some watercolor down on top of it, or let your first layer dry and come back in and do some wet on dry. Again, this is a great way, these aren't in your journal yet. This is the perfect time to quote unquote screw up, try some different techniques, see what you like, find out what colors complement each other, contrast, what colors you can mix together, how colors look layered or glazed on top of each other. This is the time to play. While the flowers are drying, let's work on some cute little umbrellas. What a perfect spring embellishment, right? So for these, you want to start just by dividing your watercolor paper into, I would say, 3 or 4 sections, depending on how long you want your umbrellas to be. And you're just going to take a ruler and with a pencil, just draw a few lines, and then that's going to be where the bottom of your umbrella is going to sit. I have to say, I sort of struggled with these a little bit at first in terms of creating the shape of the umbrella, but I got the hang of it, I think, after a little bit. So, first of all, I, okay, these first batch of umbrellas look a little bit too much like Christmas trees, but I promise you, actually, after I doodled and gave them a couple of accessories, they looked exactly like umbrellas. So if you struggle a little bit with the shape, don't worry, I promise it will get better. Okay, so leave some room up at the top for the handle of your umbrella. Okay, that's what makes it look like an umbrella. What you're going to do is just take your brush and create a line and just kind of taper it to the bottom so that the umbrella comes to a point. And then once you create the actual structure of the umbrella, leave some white space between the bottom of the umbrella and where you start your hook. And your hook can be, or the holder of the umbrella can be a straight line or it can be a hook. All that really matters is that you leave a little bit of white space. I think it looks a little bit better that way, and you'll see why when we're going to doodle it and fill in some details. But just focus on getting that blob to come to a point at the bottom. Add a little nub where the umbrella is. You can fan it out a little bit, or you can keep it kind of ruffled together at the bottom. Leave a little white space, and then base of the umbrella being like a straight line or a hook, and then you've got the basic shape of your umbrella. I do think the second batch was a little bit better than the first, but you learn as you go. I think the reason why the second one was better is because I wasn't quite as heavy-handed with the paints. I kept it more light and airy. I think I did a little bit better job at leaving some white space at the end of the umbrella where it fans out and where it meets the holder. I also did some ruffling at the bottom of the umbrella and then had it taper in a little bit and then kind of create the body of the umbrella to make it look like, that string that you use to wrap up the umbrella is on it. So I feel like I just did a better job at making varying shapes. of the umbrella, and I do a couple of other things to kind of customize them, which I'll show you in a minute. But once I figured out the basic structure of it, I had so much fun creating these. All right, so this is the last of the painting, guys. Before we start doodling, these are mason jars. Talk about easy. And this is one of my absolute favorites. So all we're doing is making some blobs at the bottom for the base and some cylindrical objects up top as the lid. You definitely want to leave some white space in between your base and the lid. And go, honestly, these look really, really good doing wet on wet. Like put some water down and then put your color on top. I don't know why it looks so good. And these look so good blended. It just gives the illusion that there's something in the jar. You don't, this is supposed to be a jar. You don't want it to be flat. And when you're too heavy handed with the paint, you don't blend and you don't leave white space. I think that has a tendency of happening. You'll see your jars can be all different shapes and sizes. They can be sort of like a square jar, like a candy jar, a circular jar, a taller jar, like your standard mason jar. And I'm even making a bottle of olive oil here where it's thin up at the top and flares out to that nice bold round um, thing that it does at the bottom. And so just be light and airy. Remember, we're filling in a lot of the details with our pens. So don't be too heavy-handed. Keep it very light, very whimsical, and you really can't go wrong with these. Guys, this is absolutely where the magic happens. We're going to start the doodling process. If you're looking at your paintings and you're thinking, oh my gosh, these look flat and they look bland and plain, oh, we are about to change that. Grab yourself a black pen, maybe some colored pencils if you really want to get fancy. If you painted with some darker inks, um, a white pen for doodling looks magical. And actually, regardless of what color of inks you chose, sometimes using a white pen will look like super, super, super magical because you can add some little highlights. If you're looking to keep it really basic, don't you worry about that. I'm just giving that to you as an option. Relax, have fun, don't be too rigid, be loose, squiggles, lines, dots, however you want to do this. Like, for example, that blue flower, I think it's beautiful. And the thing that's so interesting about it is the petals aren't all the same. Some of them are rounded, some of them come to a point, and some of them kind of look like they've had a bite taken out of them, and that's okay. Um, as for the stem, you can go around it, use hash marks. You can, even if you didn't paint on these, you can draw on these and shade them in. In some of, I think the flowers I do end up dolling them up a little bit with some colored pencil, so that's an option as well to just enhance them a little bit more. Um, don't be afraid about rigidly keeping within our, you know, rigidly outlining the areas of paint. I think it looks great if you let the paint kind of bleed outside of the lines a little bit. I think it just creates interest. So just have at it. Don't worry about it. Be loose with it, and you're gonna love the way these look. I was happy to find an excuse to dig out my colored pencils. I don't know why, but I just tend to kind of forget about them. But there's something so nice about colored pencils and watercolor, especially if you can find the right color combination. It's almost like a glaze when you layer watercolor on top of each other, sort of, and create a new color. Sometimes it depends. Sometimes if you use a darker colored pencil, it can kind of outshine it. So I guess you want to be kind of careful, but again, now's the time to play around. I did a lot of outlining. There's this one pink flower where I don't know, I got really like bold and pulled out a blue watercolor or blue colored pencil. I'm not really sure what I was thinking. I end up just trying to kind of save it because it did look weird and overpowering. So I went around the flower, some areas of the flower with the blue just to kind of outline it and make it pop and somehow tied it into the bud of a flower. But yeah, I wasn't wild about it, but it's okay. I didn't ruin anything. It's only paper. It's only watercolors. It's only doodling. So now's the time to play and just have fun. When I talk about glaze, I hope I'm not offending you watercolor aficionados out there. I don't know if I'm really using the word correctly. Technically, when you're glazing with watercolor, you're applying transparent layers of paint on top of each other, and it's basically a way to sort of create depth. So it's not technically glazing when I talk about going over the watercolor with colored pencils, but I feel like sometimes if you use the colors correctly, it has the same effect. Does that make sense? When I talk about glaze, I hope I'm not offending you watercolor aficionados out there. I don't know if I'm really using the word correctly. Technically, when you're glazing with watercolor, you're applying transparent layers of paint on top of each other, and it's basically a way to sort of create depth. So it's not technically glazing when I talk about going over the watercolor with colored pencils, but I feel like sometimes if you use the colors correctly, it has the same effect. Does that make sense? And just to clarify, these are regular colored pencils. I have been dying to use the watercolor distress pencils that I've seen out there, the ones that react to water. But I am desperate to destash. I don't use a lot of the supplies I have like I should. So maybe over the next couple of months, if I'm really good about digging into my stash and making some room in my office, I will take a whirl at them. If you guys have used them and really like them, can you just share your experience with them down in the comment box below? I read all your comments. I would love to hear from you guys. If they're a regular supply of yours that you have some experience with, tell me how you like to use them in your projects. Tell me what brand you have. I've seen the Tim Holtz ones. I've seen a couple other brands. Just share with me what you know. I would love to hear from you. Let's start working on those umbrellas. I just started making these a couple of days ago. This was my second go at this, but I have to tell you, this may be one of my favorite pieces of ephemera. Once you get the structure of the umbrella down, it just comes together really nicely, and there are actually a lot more ways that you can customize these than I was originally thinking. You'll see I have ones that taper up at the top with the little band around it. There are all different kinds of hooks and like umbrella holders you can make. You can make it so that the umbrella kind of fans out almost like a little tree. There's so many different ways you can actually customize the umbrella itself. Doodles decorations. One of them I think I even made as a Chanel umbrella. How fancy, right? Probably cost you like 300 bucks. But anyways, there's so many ways you can decorate these. Think of the different patterns you can create. Think of the ways you can customize that little nub at the top. The little holder that binds the umbrella together. Maybe you add a bow, and again, you can doll these up with colored pencils. You could do all different kinds of things to decorate these. Your imagination is the only limit. I saved the jars for last because these might be my absolute favorite thing to doodle, and there's so many ways that you can customize them. And I have to tell you, never did I think something so great could come from so many just random blobs on a piece of paper. But here, you don't even have to take my word for it. Let's do it together. I will show you all the ways you can customize these beauties. Let's start with the base. By the way, remember if the jar isn't the exact shape you want, it's okay. You can reshape it. We are cutting these out, so nothing is to say that you can't kind of reshape it a little bit and just cut off the excess paint. Same with the top. That that orangish jar that becomes a honey jar, I started creating a lid and I didn't like the lid, and so it looks weird because there's like three tiers to it. That's because I end up cutting that top layer off um away with these. So, there's all different kinds of ways you can fix this if you start doodling and decide that it's not the shape you want. But again, it's gonna look like a jar, I promise you. As long as you have the base of the jar and something that resembles a lid, you're gonna be good to go. You'll know exactly what they are. Think about adding layers to the lid. Um, that can kind of make it more three-dimensional. Also giving it that skirt, the piece of fabric that you put over the jar when you're giving it to somebody to kind of dress it up a little bit. Adding those ruffles, those can really give the jar a lot of dimension and character. If, like me, you only started with blobs and you did not really paint in any other colors, this is the project that I would really recommend adding some colored pencils to. The honey jar, I made the ruffles red, and I ended up adding that little honey stir. So, you can keep it very basic, like that olive oil jar I have in the top right. If you want to make these more complex and give them detail, I think colored pencils are the way to go. You can give these jars labels and add flowers or wraps around them to decorate them. You can give them little tags. Little tags is a great way to customize them. I love doing that. Gosh, there's so many different possibilities, so many different ways you can customize these and just make them absolutely adorable. As for cutting these out, well, you guys know how to fussy cut. The one thing I will say is I think these look good with a little thin area of white space around them. And I would recommend getting a large pair of scissors and a small little pair to get around any extra little details you may have created. But in general, the larger ones work better to fussy cut faster, which I don't know about you guys. I'm not the biggest fan of fussy cutting. It's monotonous. Usually I try and turn on some music or like a podcast while I'm doing it to keep myself occupied. I guess it kind of is a good way to just zone out and forget about life. But yeah, usually for me, the sooner I'm done with fussy cutting, the happier I am. Wow, guys, can you believe it? These actually look like umbrellas, even more so after they're cut out. See, creativity doesn't have to be hard, and you just trust the process. Just keep going until whatever you're working on reflects your personal taste and your style. And I am thrilled with how these all came out. Isn't this incredible? Especially for someone who cannot draw, can't paint, and look at these darling little things. Oh, I love these. Here's a close-up look. I have to say the pink and the purple one where I left that bit of white space and then used the bow as the tuck around that you normally use to hold the umbrella together. Ah, I love that. And I don't know what's going on with the base. I think it's the white space that I left in between the ruffled portion and the handle of the umbrella, but it just, oh, I love it, guys. Love, love, love. Let's take a final look at the ephemera we created. I hope I proved to you that things don't have to be painstakingly difficult for them to be worthwhile. Not only did I make some pieces of ephemera I can't wait to put in my journals, I thoroughly enjoy this process. I think this is why it's one of my favorite embellishments to make. You can't screw it up. It's really low pressure and it gets the creative juices flowing. I think after making these pieces of ephemera, I have a much better idea as to the type of spring journal I want to create. I think it's going to be bright and bold. And I really love creating and crafting this time of the year. So, thank you so much for coming along on this journey with me. I hope you enjoyed the process and I hope you came out with some great pieces of ephemera you also will be using in your journals. If you enjoyed this and found value in this, please hit that like and subscribe button, and I can't wait to see you the next time.